You are listening to the Novel Writing Podcast, episode 130. Today, I have my business coach, Dave Moreno, with me to talk about author entrepreneurship and why it's important to think about your author journey as a business right from the start. I want to preface this conversation by saying that I do see many authors having this dream of becoming a full-time author, whether that's through traditional publisher or self-publishing, but they don't actually treat any of the process like they're running a business. It's more like, oh, I have time to do this. This is a hobby. I have been working with Dave since about May of 2022, so coming up on 2 years, which is fun. And I have found all of his entrepreneurial guidance incredibly relevant to my author business, not just to owning or co-owning Tally Inc. So, without further ado, Dave, please give our listeners the rundown of who you are and what you do.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I am Dave Moreno. I am the badass business coach. That's what I'm referred to as. But all that means is really I'm a coach for entrepreneurs who want to grow personally and professionally in the simplest, easiest way possible. Now, people think that those don't go together. They absolutely do. Basically, if you're not where you want to be personally or professionally as a business owner, I'm the guy you call. Simple as that.
And one of the things you say is every problem with a business is a problem with the entrepreneur. And I have
Yeah.
seen that time and time again in my own business that every
Yeah.
time I have a problem, it's me. I'm the problem.
Yeah. Hello, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. It is absolutely fundamentally true every time. I was just talking to a new client yesterday and told them that, and it's so funny how the first time you tell someone that they go, "I think you're right." And I'm like, "I know I'm right," but it's just funny watching people realize it for the first time of going, "It's not my marketing. It's not my sales. It's not this. I have a problem, and now it's just transferring into my business in this way."
Yeah. So is an author business different from other businesses in your experience?
No, it's an interesting question I get. I get it from a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer, a real estate professional. Is my business different? Everyone wants to think their business is different in some way, either because it's harder or they're not having as much success, so it must be different. All businesses have a product or service that they're trying to transact with. That's all. You're trying to transact in some way. Even a non-for-profit, it's the same setup, a product or service you're trying to transact with. That's the basis of all business. So once we get to that level, we know we can also universally apply all the tools to any business and help it grow.
So with that being said, why is it important for authors in particular to have a business mindset, especially from the start?
So, you have three types of people. You have an artist, you have an entrepreneur, you have a manager. And most writers are artists, and they should be if they're writing a book. If you're a entrepreneur writing a book, you're gonna have a really hard time. If you're a manager writing a book, it's gonna be very stale. If you want to have a great book, you should be an artist. And most authors that I've seen, especially in the fiction space, are artists by trade. Now, they create something from their imagination, and that's beautiful. But every artist needs to understand the manager and entrepreneurial role, because if all they do is write, they're not going to sell. And if all they do is try to sell, they're not going to write. We have to understand both fundamentals. If your purpose of writing a book is to impact the world, sell it, transact with it, and get it out there, you need to start thinking about business up front when you're writing the book so that you know what are, the way I'm writing it, the tools I'm putting into it. What are some aspects of how I'm writing that I could use in my marketing? What's a really good piece? We've talked about chapter giveaways. We've talked about, how we incentivize people to buy. We've talked about thinking, are you going to write 3 books? Because here's a funnel that you can use if you're going to write multiple books versus just writing one book and seeing how it goes. That business thinking ahead of time helps you prepare for when you're done writing.
For the authors who are listening, who are hearing all of this stuff about business and feel a little bit scared, where would
Yeah.
be the easiest place for them to start?
Well, the easiest place is probably to find a voice in the business world that you think will speak to you. My voice is always available. I have my podcast and I have my website and things where you can hear a voice if that's what you're looking for. But in the business world, there is no shortage of voices out there. I would recommend either finding, one of the easiest ways to start actually is to go find an author who's successful, one that you love. Go look at what they're doing. The nice thing about social media today, one of the only nice things about social media, because it's such a mess otherwise, is that you can go to someone who's successful and you can scroll back in their history and see how they got there. You can watch it, the tactics they used, what they were doing. So go find an author that you find successful, maybe not that far ahead of you. You don't need to go find, a best-selling New York Times author. Go find someone slightly ahead that you like reading, maybe inspired you. Go look at their social media. What have they done business-wise to get to where they are?
Yeah, I do that a lot with the other fiction authors in my space. I
Yeah.
like following them just to see what they're doing. I'm like, oh, I could do that, but then I
Yeah.
think of all the other stuff I have to do. I'm like, oh, I don't have time.
Yeah. I mean, I've been to enough Tony Robbins events right now that I could run one of them. It's not that hard, but I continue to go and listen to his voice only because now I do it from an aspect of how do you do that? What are you really doing there? What's the strategy to that? How did you get to this level? And so I've learned the concepts. Now I go to learn the actions. And
Yeah.
that's where the business side really comes up. I'm an artist by trade too. I didn't realize this until Tony literally coached me on this and told me I was an artist, and I had no idea. But I'm an artist. I love to create. I love to make impact. And I had to learn how to be an entrepreneur. And that's why I do what I do now, because so many artists start business and don't understand they're not running it correctly because they're running it from creativity and imagination, not from strategy.
So with writing, there's in the book world, just generically, there's nonfiction and there's fiction. I know you have a
Mhm.
lot of other clients who have written fiction, and I've been part of their book launches, and it's been really fun to see
Yeah.
their success. But I think I'm your only client who writes fiction. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. They're all nonfiction books typically. They're all
Do you see,
self-help or some sort of something
okay.
to do with their business. Yeah.
Do you see any difference in how to approach running a business with fiction versus nonfiction?
Slightly, perhaps. Now, the strategies may be slightly different. Universally, at 40,000 feet, it's all the same. But when we get into the nitty gritty of it, when you're writing a book, a self help book, a book on, you want to really promote you. Here's me, here's my history, here's my background. That's why you want to buy my book. In your case, you want to promote the characters, the story, the escape, what's happening, the world they're going to dive into. It's a slight difference on what you market, but the way you market is exactly the same. I would, when I release a book, I would focus on myself, my history, my what made me write this book. If you did that in a fiction world, people would be like, "That's great, you sound awesome. What's the book about? Where am I going? Is this, what type of book is it? Is it fantasy? Is it sci-fi? Where are we going?" You really have to promote, your maps and your characters and the cliffhangers are going to create and make people get invested in the story and the characters where, if I write a self-help book, I want people invested in me so they want to read it.
You mentioned something that really leads into the next question, which is about core messages.
Yeah.
So you said that you want to market like the escape. One of
Yeah.
my core messages for the books that I write is escape into fantasy without sacrificing your values, which we've talked
Yes.
about extensively before.
Yeah.
But can you talk more about what core values are and why they're important for authors to know what they are and to consistently come back to them when they're marketing?
Okay, so core values are these really simple, disruptive sentences that you use over and over repeatedly. You're going to get sick of them. That's the point of them, but that you can be repetitive with so your customers hear it over and over and over. A core message for Coca-Cola is crisp and refreshing. Like they'll use those words over and over and over because they want to program those into the people. If I describe my book 1,000 different ways on 1,000 different interviews, no one's going to see consistency. I'm going to pick up a few people here and there. If I describe my book only 5 ways through 1,000 interviews, everyone, it's going to be consistent. And the audience that I'm trying to get will wake up every time I speak. So I've seen the masters do this. I've seen people, like I said, I mentioned before Tony Robbins, because I've studied him extensively. He's been doing this for 47 years now. And he says the same 5 core messages all the time. And in 47 years, they've rarely changed. And so you go to an event and you'll hear him say the same thing over and over, the same thing over and over. But it's still impactful. And that's why I remember all of them. That's why I know them so well. And so if you really want to wake up your audience, figure out how can I disrupt and call their attention? Okay. Write down 4 or 5 sentences that are aligned to your values personally, your business's values, and your customers' values. That's the trifecta you want. They feel good to me, they represent my business, and my customer will like them. Okay. So, for instance, yours, those are the trifecta that we try to use when you're doing it. You write books a certain way because it's aligned to your values, right? It's also aligned to your customers' values. Your business loves that and it tries to put those two together. So, that's where that line comes from. And that's what you want to use consistently. When you're writing a book, you should be thinking about your core messages as you write it. And maybe you just jot a few down and maybe you end up with 10 or 15 core messages throughout. And then you have to do the work to narrow it down to about five real core messages.
And core messages aren't necessarily about the book or the content of the book. It's about who you are as an author and how what you bring to your books. So like my
Yeah.
core messages aren't specific about the Chronicles of Talam or the books in that series. They're
Right.
specific about the type of book that I write, so that when I do expand outside of that universe and go into different series,
Yes.
potentially different genres, they still apply.
Correct. So if you were thinking just as an author and just as an artist, you would have developed core messages specifically on the Chronicles of Tulum, right? And you would have just developed those core messages. And then later, when you thought, oh, I want to keep writing, I'm too young to stop writing. I'm just getting started. Let's go. You're like, shoot, I have to reprogram all new core messages into my audience. It's not going to make sense to them. Because you thought as a business owner along the way, you thought, I want to develop core messages that speak to the worlds I create, the characters I bring to life. What would speak to them in the style that I write? Not necessarily about you, but about the way you write. That's how you develop your messages. And that's why, as a business owner and a business thinker, an artist who runs a business, you have set yourself up for success for many, many years because of that.
And when you're first starting out, it's okay to let them evolve a little bit. Like the
Yes.
one that I said, escape into fantasy without sacrificing your values, might evolve into escape into fiction, because I don't plan to just stick in the fiction genre. I might
Yeah.
actually, I do have plans to jump over to like
Yeah.
sci-fi or adventure and stuff like that.
Here's the thing, about 80% of your core message will remain intact,
Yeah.
but 20% of it might change over time. And that's totally fine.
So you also teach that every entrepreneur needs to know their quote unquote run tasks versus their grow tasks.
Yes.
What does that mean, and what activities fall into each category for authors?
Well, we've had detailed conversations on this. You've actually helped me expand my definitions because you had a lot of specific questions around it, which I love. Run are things that you have to do on a day-to-day basis, and grow are things that you have to do in order to attract new business. So an example being, run are things like recording this podcast. This is a run task that you and I are doing. This is how we run the business. We record a podcast. We're writing chapters. We're working with an editor. We are writing email sequences for our email list. We're creating social media content. Those are all running things. Growing tasks are actually marketing. So it's actually doing a book tour, sending an email, showing up at a conference, posting on social media, the act of taking your creation and posting it. Those are all growth tasks, which means that the majority of your tasks are going to be run based. And then growth tasks are the things that you do to put yourself out in the world. But the things you do to set yourself up to put yourself out in the world are run tasks. Creating social media is on my calendar as a run task. Recording podcasts is on my calendar as a run task, right? But posting to social media and showing up at a conference and speaking and that, those are all growth-based tasks, because those will actually bring people to me. Creating social media posts do not bring people to me. Posting them does. And that's where you define the difference between the both.
I think I distilled it down to production versus promotion.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Because when I'm thinking about writing a book, it's yes, I have to get the words out on the page, but I also have to be coordinating with my editors and my cover designer and my
Yeah.
formatter slash illustrator, like all of those pieces in the
Yeah.
background. So it's not just producing the book, it's
Right.
producing all of the pieces that make the book the thing that you can hold in your hands after it's published.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay. A really popular question that you get from clients is, if you were to take over or buy my business, what would you change? And you have your fingers in my author business, but also
Yeah.
in Tally Inc. But so
Yeah.
specifically for the author business, what's like one thing you would change knowing what you know about my goals?
Well, I'd write your books faster, but that's easy to say because I'm not an author. And so as
Fair.
a business strategist, I would write your books faster. But I mean, that's a joke. In all honesty, it's a little unfair because we've already worked together for so long that there's actually, and I thought about this for a while. There's actually nothing I would change at the moment about your business, because I think we've set up such strategy and vision for you over the next 6 months of, releasing a new book, getting out there with that new book, having the right sequence and funnels for, getting book 1, 2, and 3 in people's hands, and that I think right now it's a matter of time for you. And so there's nothing I would actually change. What I would do is monitor all the data of all the steps coming up in the next 6 months and be quick to pivot when required. And so if something is not showing value or progress, I would make a shift quickly and not wait till the end of 6 months or, the end of the year to go, oh, that didn't really work out. I would be quick to pivot. That's the only thing I would change, because we have done so much work to set it up. Now, if you asked me that question 2 years ago, I would have been like, okay, we need to get a funnel. We need to start getting people into the thing that is released, your first book. How can we incentivize them to read? Look, if they grasp it and the first chapter or two really get them, how can we incentivize them to read those chapters, drop all barriers to it? I would want to get your works out in the world more. This is all what we did anyway. And so right now, the nice benefit is there's nothing I would change, but I would monitor the next 6 months closely.
I'm just still laughing about write books faster because yes, that is every author's dream, is to write books
Yeah,
faster and get
of
them
course.
produced faster.
If I was
Here,
just a very simplistic coach, I'd be like, no, write faster. No, get more chapters done. I understand there's a creative process, and you also have a life and other things that you do in this life. And so that's unfair to say. And I want authors to know that's not always the answer. I think, I was last week, I was out with some clients and we were shooting guns. And I don't shoot guns on a regular basis, but it was kind of fun to go out with this military tactical guy and shoot guns. And the saying in guns is slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
yep.
And I was actually thinking about that with writing, because I'm looking at a book that I'm going to be doing this year, and I'm like, okay, what if I adapt that into writing? Like, that has to be the case, because if you speed through a book, the quality of the content won't be as good. And I watch you over the last few years. You really need to slow it down and be like, let me really think through how this is going to affect not just this chapter, but the rest of the story and where I want to go. Is that the right detail? Am I going into enough detail? Is it too much detail? So I don't think faster is always the option. I think there is a world out there where people are rushing books out and using other sources to create content very quickly these days. And that is not, I really hope there's actually a lawsuit going on right now. I meant to tell you about that. A lawsuit with the New York Times right now against AI. And it's supposed to really slow down AI's impact in the world, which is awesome, because they have found, New York Times has found, when you AI something, when you go and Google or put it into AI, it is pulling content from New York Times articles. The New York Times is saying, listen, I have paid people to write these articles. They are on my member only site. And scraping the internet, which is what AI does to learn, scraping the internet is plagiarism. And so this is going to go to the Supreme Court. It's in New York District Court right now. It'll end up in the Supreme Court, and chances are they're going to win. And if they win, AI will probably be reversed by 10 to 15 years, which is crazy.
Oh man, that's
Yeah.
all of the authors that I work with are going to be like excited to hear that, because one
Yeah,
of
I
the
thought so.
main problems that we've seen is just the flooding of Amazon with poorly written, really quickly
Yeah.
written books that
Yeah.
are like, oh, I can pop this up on Amazon. I have a really good marketing strategy, point people to
Yeah.
it. It's like, I don't know, $2. They buy it, they make money, and then
Yeah.
the readers find out it's garbage.
Crap.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So this is more protection for that, which I think will be good.
Yeah, but I like that you said that it's the part of the creative process is to slow down, because every time I have gone through rewrites, every time I have slowed down and gone on hikes and thought about the book, I have come up with much better plot structure, much
Yeah.
better plot twists and obstacles and like character development than I ever did in the very first draft, which is why we say the first draft is supposed to be garbage.
Yeah.
And I just love my favorite part of the writing process is the rewrite, even though it takes so long sometimes. The rewrite is where all of the best pieces come out, because you have to get the first version of the story down in the first draft, and sometimes your final draft is not going to look anything like your first draft, which is
Yeah.
kind of bananas, the progress it has to go through. But yeah, fast books, I don't think all fast books are as good as people think they are.
Well, rarely in life or business, very rarely, is speeding up or increasing speed the right answer. People feel it is, because if it gets done faster, it's better. And it's rarely the answer. Most times, most of my job is actually slowing people down and really thinking through strategy and not rushing through things because they just want a result. So I encourage people to go at the pace that is required for the best quality product that they can produce.
And we've talked about that. I have a much faster pace than other people.
Yes.
I need to slow down to make people not be mad with me.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think is important for authors to understand about business?
Business is a game of time. We just talked about it a little bit. If you're not willing to do the time, don't start the business. There are very few businesses that get off the ground quick, make money quick, and last long, right? You got to choose. You want to get off the ground quick and make money quick, or do you want a business that lasts a long time? And you got to have to choose between those two. And if you want the business that lasts a long time, you have to give it time. Businesses are like babies. right? If you had a brand new baby and it's 3 months old and you're pissed off because it's not walking or talking yet, you really misunderstand how kids grow. And so you can't be frustrated by things that are not a surprise. And so, especially in an author business and looking at your business too, it takes time. I mean, if you happen to be best friends with Oprah and you get on her book club, great. But other than that, every author is going to face, hey, this takes time. And it
Yeah.
takes time to get my works into the world. And it's a very crowded space. And so you have to, if you enter a hall and it's very crowded and there's $1 million down at the end of the hall, sure, it's yours, it's got your name on it, but it's going to take you time to get through that crowd. Most people think they walk into a hallway that's completely empty. And you walk in a hallway, especially as an author, it's a very crowded hall. And you're going to have to
Yeah.
fight your way through and bump your way through. And there are going to be times you're going to have to stop. There are going to be times you're going to be pushed backwards, and that's okay. Just give it time. Don't give up. The only person who fails is the one who gives up. If you keep giving it time, if you keep pushing your books out, keep pushing your messages out, it will grow. It's
Yeah.
guaranteed.
All right. I have some lightning round questions for you.
Yeah,
So
let's
fast as
go.
possible. What
Let's
is the
go.
best piece of business advice you have ever received?
Trust the process. 3 words, best piece of advice I ever got.
What is your favorite thing to talk about with business owners?
Their vision, followed by what's holding them back from it, because that's where you get all the gold.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
Most memorable story from your years coaching?
This is 6 years ago. Iron sharpens iron. There was a client who came to an event and I did not think they needed my coaching. They were extremely strong, extremely successful. And I was questioning why they were even there. There was a moment of self-doubt on my part of my own value. And so it bothered me so much that at the end of the event, I asked them, I said, what are you doing here? Why do you come to this? And they looked me dead in the eye and said, iron sharpens iron. And they hired me there as a one-on-one coach right then and there after that conversation. And I've been working with them for 3 years now. And I'll never forget that statement. So now I know there is no one I can't work with. I don't care if they're ahead of me, behind me. I don't care where they are. Iron sharpens iron. And so I
Oh, I
love
love
that
that.
one. Yeah.
Most impactful thing you've learned from a client recently?
I was actually down helping a client with something, and I didn't realize this fully, I don't think, but they took all of my quotes and they wrote them on the studs of their house before they finished building their house. And so every room of their house has a quote or a statement that I've said written in permanent marker on literally the foundation and studs of their home that they plan to live in for the rest of their life. And that to me was just, it blew me away. I was like, literally, this surrounds you every day. Like the words that I've said on a whim, on nowhere, on a Friday call, apparently really impacted them. And I just thought that was amazing.
And your favorite fiction book that you've read in the last year?
Well, yours, of course. I always keep it here, right? I honestly don't read much fiction. And I probably should because I really do enjoy them. I would say the ones that do get my attention quite well is the Mitch Albom books, right? The Five Strangers You Meet in Heaven, The Next Person You Meet in Heaven. Those 2 books actually I really, really loved. Here's my thing. I love fiction books that are also merged into the world of self-development a little bit because it doesn't make me feel guilty reading it because I'm still learning from it. So like the 5 People You Meet in Heaven definitely has self-development stuff in it, which is really important to me.
You might like Juliet's School of Possibilities then by Laura Vanderkam. It's more of a
Oh,
fable
okay.
type one.
Good. I was hoping to get book recommendations from you. Thank you.
Always.
Yes.
All right. If authors listening are interested in either working with you or learning more about your work, what is the best way for them to get connected?
Well, I have a podcast called Next Level Business. You can look that up. That's all free content. There's nothing there. If you want to know more about me, you can go on Instagram at Dave Moreno Coaching, or you can go to my website, www.davemoreno.ca, because I'm a Canadian boy, so it's .ca.
Dave, thank you so much for coming on to talk with the authors today. I always love talking with you, but it's really great to get your voice on the podcast as well.
Thank you so much. It was an honor. Appreciate it.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you for listening. And remember, the first draft is supposed to be garbage. Thanks for listening to the Novel Writing Podcast. If you're ready to stop struggling and start finishing your novel, check out the 60-Day Novel Writing Challenge. It's a step-by-step program designed for solo writers to complete their first draft with clarity and focus. Visit the link in the description to learn more.